snakes elicit a big response out of people. You're either super interested in them or super terrified by them. Coming home from work, gearing up and heading out is no different than when I was a kid getting home from school every day. On one of our taller mountains one night, just on a survey on my own, I noticed in a little roadside gutter, there was a many-banded crate. And I saw a little snake in front of it. And all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, this is Hong Kong's rarest snake species being chased by a highly venomous predator. And my local guides they already thought I was a little bit off my rocker by wanting to go out in the jungle in the middle of the night to find snakes. Covered in welts and feeling like I was on fire, we started to do the photographs.
You also are learning a lot more every time you go out into the field.
You know, that brings up a couple of interesting points. It's completely true.
Hello and welcome everyone to our first ever episode of Biodiversity Explorers. Today we're going on a brand new expedition together to explore an iconic legless slithering animal with our guest, Adam Francis, and of course all of you, where we'll be talking about all things snakes or turtles and exciting stories in the field. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you very much.
Some people might know you from the snakes of Hong Kong and the turtles of Hong Kong, but for people who don't know you, could you introduce yourself briefly and where you're from?
Sure. So my name is Adam Francis. I'm originally from the United States, the Northeast, right around the Boston area. Although I grew up in the southern United States where I got some of my initial exposure to reptiles and amphibians as a kid. And I sort of came up as an adult in the business world. So I went to school for business, graduated with a degree in finance and a minor concentration in Mandarin Chinese.
Wow.
I started my career in New York. And about a year into my first job, I was sent out to Asia on work assignment. A 3-month work assignment that I'm now in my 20th year of.
You stayed longer than expected.
A little bit longer than expected, yeah, which was fine for me. It's been great fun. I would say for the first 10 to 15 years, I was pretty heavily focused on my professional life and my family. And after about 10 years in the mainland, a couple years in Japan, I came back through Hong Kong. And this time around, it was from a time standpoint, I had a bit more flexibility. Work was manageable. And because of the very unique setup we have here in Hong Kong, where we've got this sort of urban and jungle adjacent setup, I was actually able to focus time during the day on my professional life and family. And then at night, instead of rolling into a pub, you can put your hiking gear on and march out into the woods with a torch and a camera and get out there and experience the really incredible biodiversity we have here. And it's great because you can go from where we are now in the Biodiversity Museum at HKU, and from here it's literally 5 minutes, I think roughly in that direction, to get into the woods and start observing some wildlife. So I went from casual observer of wildlife to having accumulated enough information and photos and firsthand experience to where I decided I wanted to make a little bit more of an impact and contribution into an area that I'd always loved so much, this nature and wildlife space. And that was really the start of the inspiration for the books and the websites and a lot of the things I've done since.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you talked about your experience of just leaving work and then just putting on your hiking gear. I don't think many people kind of do that as their after work pastime. So were you always like this? And even when you were a child, were you always out in nature, or did something inspire you to make that change and step out to explore nature?
You know, it's kind of funny the way you describe it, coming home from work, gearing up and heading out. Is no different than when I was a kid getting home from school every day. Sometimes even if I could sneak out early enough before school, causing my mother a lot of headaches because, I'd be out and getting muddy and everything else before I had to be somewhere important where I needed to be clean. I always had the passion as a child. I don't really know what triggered it. I was always just fascinated by wildlife and nature. Knowing you could just walk into your backyard, look around the bushes or the trees and find an interesting insect, maybe a reptile, it was always amazing to me. And from a very early time, I was interested in the more obscure creatures in nature. And I think it has a lot to do with what they look like when you actually take a really good image of them. So if you take a really good image of a very small bug that maybe you'd never looked at closely before, you see that it's actually looks kind of like a robot or a dinosaur or something like that. The features are always really quite interesting and compelling. And snakes and lizards and turtles and things like that fall in that category for me. It was always just amazing to me that nature would create something in this form factor. People do like to go hiking in Hong Kong, more and more so.
Yeah.
But yes, going out at night is not something that's normally on people's radar here. I think there is some concern about snakes and things like that going out at night. People do know that they're here, and most people's relationships with snakes are a little bit more cautious than mine.
Talking about like your life experience, was it always snakes for you?
Interesting.
Or
Yeah.
not? Or there was many other things you were interested in?
Touching back on that point of my experience in my youth, I was always generally interested in nature. But there was something about herpetofauna that was particularly interesting and engaging for me.
So herpetofauna is...
Yeah, herpetofauna is actually reptiles and amphibians.
Yeah.
It was always that category that I was particularly drawn by. I also remember once as a young boy driving around with my father and seeing a hawk flying over a field that had a snake in its talons. And I remember asking my dad, I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, that's a snake he's got." And I said, "Well, where did he get it?" He says, "Well, he just flew over and found it somewhere." I said, "So they're just out there? We could go look for them and just find them if we wanted to?" He said, "Yeah, you could do that." And so that kind of triggered for me that, oh, I could just do this. I could just go look. And I happened to live in an area back then where wildlife was also quite accessible, a little bit more suburban, semi-rural type area. And so, yeah, it allowed me to get out and look for things and explore as a young person. Now, my parents were great supports as well. They bought me field guides, not unlike these, and I could read them at night. And then if I found something during the day, I could look it up.
Yeah, that's quite peculiar because you talked about like collecting field guides over the years and maybe even starting from your childhood. Did those field guides kind of inspire you even more to just go out and document things?
Yeah, it's like anything. I think if you've got a passion for something, you can feed that passion. So my parents were very good. You know, every once in a while, my brother and I have one older brother. We'd get to go to the bookstore and they'd say, "Okay, you guys can each pick out a book or two." And I would always gravitate straight for the wildlife section. And, you know, over the course of several years, you can amass a little bit of a collection. And it was great for me. When I was done exploring during the day, I could still explore at night through the books.
Do you think that reading books and different field guides about wildlife helped you learn more than maybe you would in school or biology lesson?
It's all about how you as an individual kind of self-actualize the learning. I was always much more of a let me go off into the woods. So even the field guides for me were kind of second-tier priority for how I wanted to experience the wildlife. I think the field guides were a big part of it for me. And the great thing about them was I could see snakes from all over the world and other animals from all over the world.
Yes, you don't have to like take a flight just to somewhere to see that one snake.
Well, it made me want to. Yeah, for sure. If you look in these books that I've written, you'll notice there's a really heavy emphasis on the photography. So as a young kid, I used to love to see the pictures. Now, normally you'd open a field guide and you'd see an interesting animal and you'd get one good picture of it. And then you'd be on to the next animal. And for me, I always wanted more. I wanted to see, you know, what else it looked like in different colors. And the other thing I noticed with that was that sometimes the photo of the animal was accurate, but some of the animals would be what you call polymorphic. So within the same species, you can have many different colors and patterns and variation.
Right. So it would look different firsthand in the field.
Yeah, so if you're trying to identify it, that's a challenge, obviously. But more importantly, I think the concept for me was, let's show it in all its many brilliant forms and get people excited about it. And I found that through visual media, you can really engage people and you can kind of demystify a little bit. For certain people that have certain concerns about this type of wildlife, the pictures, it's going to be compelling one way or another. It'll maybe stoke their fear and discomfort a little, or maybe their interest and their passion a little bit, but they'll be able to see it in all its glory. And especially for kids, I find that that visual component is a real big factor in engaging them and getting them excited about it. I just thought back to my own childhood and said, what would I have liked to have seen more? And I know because I was such a power user of these things and so passionate about it, that if I did it in a way that would have satisfied my younger self, I knew there's a really good chance that the result would also be something that would be compelling for young people these days.
Just Talking about photography, amazing photos, by the way, just
you.
looking at your books. Were you always into photography? Like, was this a skill you had when you were young, or it just slowly developed as you grew?
It was almost kind of like rapidly developed, actually.
Oh.
I always liked the idea of getting good images. And I have probably at least a portion of me that has a bit of a creative bent, like to make things and all of that kind of stuff. And I also have a portion of me that's got this collector's mindset. And when you have a real passion for a certain thing, whether it's pens or cars or animals, if you're a collector type, you want to have a lot of them. I don't keep really many reptiles at home at all. And one of the reasons for that is because I feel like when I get a good image of them, that I've collected it. So for me, in terms of the photography skill set, it really started when my kids were born. I decided to invest time into learning how to properly photograph. So not just point and shoot, but getting decent cameras, good lenses, and then learning how to edit and learning how to print photos properly, because I wanted to have good memories of the family. Photographing little kids is not too different than photographing wildlife.
Just moving a lot. And
moving a lot.
unpredictable.
Yeah. And you want to get the fine detail and all that stuff. So as I was going out on these walks, trying to figure out how to get the kind of photographs I wanted of these animals. And, again, I thought back to all the wonderful images I'd seen in National Geographic over the years and the fantastic video footage you get on Discovery Channel and the David Attenborough programs. I remember thinking at one point, wow, if more people were able to develop these skill sets, if it was more accessible to more people, we'd have so much more great content that we could all consume. And so I wanted to be kind of a small part of contributing to that content base for the world of interesting video and images of these things that I'm so passionate about. That was a bit of a journey, but it was a fun journey as well, because every time you get an image that was closer to the image you have in your mind's eye of what you think this animal could look like if you did it properly, you get excited. It's fuel to keep going. It was probably only a couple of years before I'd say I really kind of dialed in my photography to images that I was starting to be happy with. As any photographer will tell you, you're ultimately never happy with your images. You're mostly happy with them if you've done the work to figure out how you want to shoot things. Now that you mention it, it was kind of the kickoff to all of these things that I've built and tried to offer up to the public. So the website was first. It's called HongKongSnakeID.com. Mm-hmm. No mystery in the name on what the website's about. Yeah. But as I started to accumulate photos, I thought, hey, it might be a good idea, since there's some very sparse resources online that help people identify snakes. There were some good university resources out there, but it was a bit more university tailored. So kind of like one page, some technical stuff, some decent photos, actually. That was really the inspiration. And I started off building the website using the photos that I'd taken.
Well, obviously now, as, can I say accomplished photographer, I would say. Yeah, you obviously have a lot of field experience. Even when making this book, I imagine a lot of hard work put into it. Were there any unforgettable or just one-in-a-lifetime experiences in the field?
Yeah, when you're out in nature frequently, over the years, you accumulate a lot of once-in-a-lifetime experiences. Sometimes if you spend a lot of time in the jungle, it's hard to come back to the city. Things are a little bit more automated here. But in terms of the work you mentioned, people used to ask me that when the book first came out, how much work went into that? And I never stopped to think about it, because the book was a result of me just collecting information and organizing it while I was doing something I was going to do no matter what, right? So I ended up doing a calculation to try and figure out how much time I spent on it. And for snakes, it was probably about 3.5 years of field work. And that was probably somewhere between 4 and 5 days a week for 3.5 years.
That's very intensive.
When I looked back on it that way, I was like, oh yeah, actually, if you consider that work, then it was a lot of work. It was certainly a lot of hours put in. And yeah, in those moments, you experience a lot. Like Hong Kong's arguably rarest snake, the mountain keelback. Very difficult to come across. It's a tiny little dark-colored sort of fossorial or semi-fossorial snake, which basically means it likes to live kind of underground or in the leaf litter. So it doesn't come out very much. It's really tiny, and it's usually found at higher elevations. So it's not going to be normally in the places people are walking if they're not out intentionally on a hike or something like that. its natural history is not very well understood, so how it behaves. And I happened to be up on one of our taller mountains one night, just on a survey on my own. And I noticed in a little roadside gutter, there was a many-banded crate, black and white banded snake. Happens to be our most toxic snake, drop for drop in terms of venom, but actually quite docile and not very inclined to bite. It was moving along, and I saw a little snake in front of it, a little dark-colored snake. And we have another small, darkish-colored snake called the white-spotted slug snake.
Yeah.
It's just a little gray-colored snake that eats snails. So funny enough, they call it a slug eater, but I never see them eating slugs, only snails, only pulling things out of shells. And my first reaction was, oh, the many-banded crate is hunting this white-spotted slug snake, because krates actually love to eat other snakes. A very common thing in snakes for them to eat other snakes.
Okay.
Which makes sense, kind of the right shape and everything, right?
And there's like a size difference between the two species?
Yeah, there's a big size difference. So let's say the many-banded crate was roughly 18 inches long, give or take. And the little snake in front of it was probably 10 cm.
Oh.
So really, really big size difference. And then I stopped to think to myself, well, I've never seen a white-spotted slug snake in this location, and it seems a bit high, elevation-wise, for them. So I was just going to kind of observe it and not do much. Predation events are always unique and fun to observe. Maybe I'd film it with my phone or something like that. But then I took a closer look, and I noticed there was a little white collar, a yellowish white collar around the other snake. And I was like, oh, that's strange. It looks too dark for a red-necked keelback, a species that has a collar. And there was another few I ran in my mental Rolodex really quickly, and then all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, this is Hong Kong's rarest snake species being chased by a highly venomous predator. And so normally I would not get involved in interrupting a predation, but it's quite a rare species. So I went over and picked it up before the many-banded crate could get to it, so I could make some observations. It ended up being quite an interesting experience, because I'd noticed that the crate must have scared it out from somewhere, and I had already been chasing it, because I don't think this is a nocturnal species. I think it probably comes out in the sunrise and sunset times of the day for the most part. But the tip of its tail was gone, and there was some clear liquid on the stub that was left over. This is not unusual. A lot of snake species are capable of dropping their tail like lizards do if something pulls on it.
Okay.
So defensively, for a snake to drop the tail, that wasn't too surprising for me. But it seemed clear to me that there'd probably been an envenomation, so that the crate had probably gotten its fangs into the mountain keelback. Now, their venom acts very slowly, normally, at least in human bite cases. And I wasn't sure how quick it acted on snakes, but I took the opportunity to set the keelback down on a rock and get some photos of it while it was alive and, well, maybe not well, but alive still, and document the animal. I ended up observing it for, I think, 4 hours.
Wow. As
you could tell that it was slowly taking on the effects of the venom. So respiration went down. It started to become lethargic. The mouth started to open. So it's a little bit of a sad story at the end. It ended up succumbing to the venom. And I was able to actually make some phone calls to some people at some universities and some of the conservation bodies here, and asked if anybody would like me to retain the specimen. And one of the groups confirmed that they would, and it ended up becoming a good record for science here in Hong Kong as a rare species that there's not too many specimens of. It ended up being an observation of a predation event, and it ended up being an observation of the specific effects of a very specific venom from a very specific snake on another snake. So there was a lot of good information that came out of it. And again, sad story for the mountain keelback, but relatively positive story for science and for the natural history record.
I imagine with these experiences, you learn, maybe you already have some knowledge of snakes, but you also are learning a lot more every time you go out into the field. Just there's something new to look at. There's something you didn't know before.
That brings up a couple of interesting points. It's completely true. One of the things I really gathered from the work on this book and the time spent in the field is that field science is still a hugely valuable practice to be engaged in. Even let's take something like the snakes of Hong Kong. We're a relatively small geographic area. The number and specific species of snakes that occur here is pretty well known. For a category of animal that's got a lot of attention paid to it, where there's a lot of knowledge on it, when you actually start to look into the natural history records, there's a lot of holes. And there's a lot of assumptions made based on observations of snakes that are supposedly the same species from a different geography, like maybe over the border in Guangdong or somewhere nearby. And as I started to see that reality play out as I was doing the research and putting my own notes next to things, it really kind of struck a chord that, wow, we really should be investing more in people that are in the sciences or even science adjacent, getting out and doing more field work. Because especially for cryptic animals like these that they spend their whole lives hiding and not wanting to be observed, it's very difficult to learn how they actually behave, what they do, what affects them in their environment, what do they affect in their environment. And even these observations like the small predation event, anybody who's in the biological sciences, when there's a video that pops up of something like that, everybody gets excited about it. Even people that have been doing it for 20 or 30 years, you might have somebody say, oh, I've been studying that species for this long and I haven't seen that behavior before. So yeah, it's an interesting point you bring up. And I think it gets to the fact that we do a lot in research and in laboratories and things like that, but we have to remember that information came from somewhere. And it normally came from people sweating, lying down in the mud in the jungles, and really kind of, I say suffering, but most of the people who do that really love it. People putting in effort.
Yeah, they don't think of it as suffering.
Yeah, I certainly didn't. So, but certainly from people putting in the effort.
Were there any kind of new, maybe behaviors or just maybe a whole new species that you discovered that was completely new to science?
Yeah, definitely on the behaviors front. You've always got lots of records when you're out there quite a bit. Everything from, an animal eating something you haven't seen it eat before, there's no record of it eating before, to a defensive behavior that hasn't been observed or written up. We have a snake here called the large spotted cat snake or many spotted cat snake. And it's kind of an arboreal species, one that likes to be in shrubs and trees.
Okay.
Eats geckos and stuff like that, comes out at night. And they have some defensive displays. They kind of try to make themselves look like a viper. They coil up and look like they're going to strike. They flatten their heads out, which is not uncommon for snakes to do. They rattle their tail in the leaves to make kind of a rattling noise. Also not uncommon in snakes, but I observed one once that puffed up its entire throat just like a frog and stayed like that for the whole time that I was photographing it. And I'd never observed it before, and I'd put the information out there and tried to do some write-ups, and I couldn't find anybody else who'd seen it or documented it before. So you get small things like that, and lots of people who spent lots of time trying to discover things and document things, and we still get new stuff, even in Hong Kong. For me personally, I have done some research work in other countries where I found new species of snake that are still in the process of being written up for description. So I won't get into too much detail, but there's a Southeast Asian country I spent some time doing some work in. And this is as a person who's not doing this as a career, but just finding time and engaging with the right people and getting out to do the work. So yeah, you can still make really exciting discoveries in this space, but not just this space, really all of science. There's still so much to be discovered if you go out and if you look.
Did you realize they were kind of new species at first look, or did it take a while to observe?
So the snake that's pretty much definitively a new species, it's part of a group of snakes that have a pretty bland appearance. Many of the species within that genus. So if you think about how animals are categorized, the most fundamental basic level species, you can get a little bit lower than that describing, but that's the individual animals. The next level up is genus. So you can have a lot of species in one genus. And within this genus, you have a lot of species that look kind of similar. Just little brown or grayish type snakes that live on the ground. And so this one was found in an incredibly remote location. So this was on the far edge of a sparsely populated large island in Southeast Asia. And it was in a bay where nobody goes, and then up a stream that nobody goes down, and then it was up a side stream from that. Wow. Pretty deep into the jungle in the middle of the night. And I found it. We did diagnostic photography, so photographs intended to help you identify the animal later. So you take from lots of different angles and make sure you don't miss anything. And when you do that for different animals, there's different things you want to make sure you capture that can help with identifying what you found. For snakes, you kind of want to get a little bit of everything, but definitely you want to get the mouth. You want to see the scales around the mouth. You want to get some good shots of the body so that you can count the number of scales that go around the back. That's a pretty big thing. If you can, you get all the belly scales so you can count how many there are. And so I did all that diagnostic photography, and it actually, funny enough, wasn't until about a week after I'd gotten back, I was on a Zoom call with Mark O'Shea and another scientist who had come on the trip with me. And Mark happens to be a specialist of snakes from this particular area. And so we just wanted to go through all the animals we found with him. We thought we knew what this snake was, but we hadn't looked too closely. And then I remember I pulled up the headshot I'd taken of that from Mark. And Mark says, hold on, stop. And anytime Mark does that with a snake species from this part of the world, we all get excited.
Yeah, it's something, it's something big.
Yeah. If he's not bored with it, then there might be something there. And, he took us through how he knew that this was new. And we did the scale counts and all that, and it became quite clear. And lucky enough, I found 2 of that exact same species in that stretch of side stream. So it wasn't just a one-off, and they were different size as well. So not necessarily just from the same clutch of eggs. And the same, born in the same year and things like that. There were definitely different animals, and because we had the reference and the 2 different individuals and things like that, it became pretty clear that this was something new we were dealing with.
Wow, that's some really exciting. I imagine the feeling you get after you discovered this is just you'll remember it for a lifetime.
Yeah, it's that's really exciting. Of course, finding them in the moment is really exciting as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you can walk for hours and not find anything. Sometimes you can be out an entire night and not get a single animal in the group that you're looking for. And so just finding it in the field is exciting enough. And this one was particularly dramatic because we're in a part of the world where this particular group of snakes can look similar to another group that's actually quite venomous, quite toxic. This group is non-venomous and not dangerous. But we were up this little stream, and I was looking at a patch of, it's kind of this type of Southeast Asian stinging nettle plant. So if you're familiar with a stinging nettle, if you brush your hand or your leg against it, it feels like it's burning. So it's kind of an uncomfortable thing. And they have a similar type plant in that area. And I was looking on this side of this stream, and all of a sudden I noticed slithering through this big patch of this stinging nettle, this little gray-brown snake. And if you know anything about snakes in the wild, they can disappear really quickly into holes, into leaf litter and things like that. So I had to make a quick decision of, do I go for this or not? And I happened to be able to see the tail quite clearly. And I had some other tools with me to do it safely because I wasn't sure what I was dealing with. I was pretty sure it was non-venomous, but you can't assume. And so I had to dive into the stinging nettles. And my local guides they already thought I was a little bit off my rocker by wanting to go out in the jungle in the middle of the night to find snakes. And then I dive into these stinging nettles and screaming up a storm at how painful and itchy it is, and trying to control the snake safely while I'm being stung and get it into a container so that we can observe it. And finally, after rolling around for about 2 minutes and trying to stop it from getting into the leaf litter, we ended up bagging it, and covered in welts and feeling like I was on fire, we started to do the photographs and make the observations. So it's definitely exciting to ID the species, but the collection process itself can actually be quite exciting too.
Yeah, and painful.
In this case, quite painful. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you can treat it as your battle scars or something.
It's just a story at that point. Yeah, it's fun for everybody else at that point.
Yeah, so you talked a lot about these animals. If there's one thing you wanted to pick, why they are so worth observing or worth studying, what would you pick?
Let's focus on reptiles and amphibians just as a starter. I think the main thing is most people don't know much about them at all. There's a real amazing array of different animals in these groups. Snakes, we have everything from tiny little blind snakes, which look like earthworms, just little black-brown things that if you didn't know any better, you would say is an earthworm, all the way up to 4.5 meter long pythons.
Wow.
And in one case, I actually found a blind snake right next to a 3.5 meter python. And so I think if you give them a chance, you'll find there's a lot to be interested in. And here's a great thing. If we narrow it down to snakes in particular, There's very few people that hate turtles. There's people that really aren't quite interested in them, and there's people that love them. There's not really anyone that's terrified of them or hates them. Similar with lizards, I guess, maybe a little bit less nice than turtles in terms of the way we depict them in cartoons and things like that.
I'm guessing because maybe they move quite slow in cartoons, generally.
I think so. And they've got the little shell and they tuck in, and there's a cuteness factor there, I suppose.
And they're usually like the good guy in the story.
Exactly. Even though some of them can be quite grumpy, actually. But for whatever reason, snakes elicit a big response out of people. I always say there's nobody on the fence about snakes. You're either super interested in them or super terrified by them. Very few people don't react at all to snakes or have no interest one way or the other. And if you engage the topic, whether you're terrified of them or you love them, you're going to learn something interesting and it's going to be compelling. I have a lot of friends that don't care for snakes, but when I show them the books and the videos, they're strangely compelled to look and to watch. And they always end up asking a lot of questions. And most of the time, people that have that kind of fear factor with snakes can actually be, maybe they'll never fully get rid of it. Maybe they'll never be fully comfortable with it. They won't be out looking for them on their own, but they will have an increased interest. And then that will help kind of soften the edges of their fear and help them out a little bit, get to know why they don't need to worry about them and maybe why they should learn more.
There is a little bit of, in the media especially, kind of a negative connotation with snakes in general. Why do you think that is? Is there something about these animals that tend to be viewed negatively?
I think it's quite reasonable. I think it's historical. I mean, it goes back as far as the historic record does in terms of the way that people in history tend to document and view snakes. And if you try and just be honest about the situation, it really does make sense. I have people come up to me and say, oh, I have an irrational fear of snakes. I say, hold on, it's probably not irrational. I bet it's a fear, and maybe it's not completely warranted to be as strong as it is. But irrational is maybe not the right word, because the reality is there are a number of snake species that if you were bitten by them, it would be quite a big problem. There's a number of snakes that are highly toxic. And if they bite you, it can be sometimes life-altering or worse. So the reason that fear exists, I think, starts from a place of preservation, self-protection. Most people aren't going to spend the time to learn what all 45 species of snake in Hong Kong look like. And even if they did, some of these snakes intentionally try and look like other snakes to confuse you. So there's non-venomous ones that look like venomous ones, and so
they're kind
on
of
and so
pretending to be venomous
forth.
snakes.
Yeah. So you really have to spend a lot of time to get to know them well enough where you've got that power of knowledge to say this one is one I don't want to be close to, and this one doesn't really matter, and things like that. The average person's not going to do that. And so what's the safest approach to being safe around snakes? Let's assume they're all dangerous. Right? Now, even imagine this for a Hong Kong scenario, let's say. Let's say you're a local family who lives in a village house and you've been there for a few generations and it happens to be adjacent to some forest. You're going to have dealt with snakes through multiple generations in that family. And let's say in the house you've got young children, elderly grandparents, and all of a sudden you're out in the garden and you see a snake move by. You really can't spend the time wondering if that snake is dangerous or not. There's probably stories in the village or even within your family of people being bitten at some point in the past and, needing medical attention or having something relatively serious happen. And so it's kind of a protective thing to be worried about all snakes because nobody's going to take the time. It's really not something we should expect people to take the time to learn which ones are dangerous and which ones aren't. So I don't hold that against people. And I think the natural result of that, media amplifies everything. If something's good, it's going to make it seem really good. If something's, controversial, it's going to make it seem really controversial. If there's a negative twist, they're going to twist it really hard. And that's just the nature of consuming media, I think, and what creates clicks and sells TV slots and things like that. So I think we shouldn't be surprised by that. The good news is in the modern day, we've got a lot of tools to sort of tamp down the extreme aspects of how these things are presented to the public. And that's really the crux of what I try to do with the things that I put out there. So the website is a very straightforward black and white description of this is what this animal is. Here's some great photos and video of them if you want to see them more. And what do you need to know about them? What's important? Well, this one is venomous. So if you do see this, make sure that you're not touching it or getting too close to it. The reality is with all of our venomous snakes, none of them want to be around us. If they see us and they have a chance to get away, they're going to get away. Everything except maybe the bamboo viper, which it's going to hide and hope you don't see it. That's why they're green. They think they blend in really well. It's also the reason they are responsible for most of the venomous bites here because,
I wanted to ask about that. Is that a frequent occurrence here in Hong Kong, having snake bites?
It's not, no. I think in a given year, there might be 100 bites at hospitals. And not all of those 100 bites end up in envenomation. Or envenoming, depending on how you like to say it. You can say it both ways, actually. There's people who actually debate these
what does it
things.
mean to be envenomated, though?
So let's say you've got a snake like the bamboo pit viper. This is probably the most common venomous snake that people encounter in Hong Kong. And being a viper, in this case a pit viper, it has two little heat-sensing pits in front of its nose. That's so when a prey item runs by in the night and it's dark and they can't really see it too well with their eyes, they can always smell it a little bit. Snakes have great sense of smell. But if they're trying to target it to hit it while it's running by, those heat pits are really helpful. And so they'll strike out and bite. Now, if it's a prey item, they're probably going to bite and inject venom. Now, how does a snake inject venom? Well, in this case, with the bamboo viper, they have venom glands kind of in their, we say it looks like their cheek. It's kind of like the back upper side of their jaw on top of their head. And it's a little sac with venom in it. And surrounding the sac is muscle. And that sac leads through channels into the fangs, which are like hypodermic needles. So hollow in the middle, little hole opened at the end. And when they bite, if they want to envenom a prey item or defensively want to envenom something that's attacking them, the muscle contracts really quickly and the venom comes out at a very high rate of speed through the fangs and into the target.
So it's like a little pump.
Yeah, like a little needle and like a pump actually. It's not a bad way to put it. So the funny thing is they can control when they bite whether or not they release the venom or not. And in a lot of cases with snakes that are biting defensively, not biting to catch a prey item, they won't inject the venom. So they bite as kind of a warning. They hope that the pain of the bite alone is enough to get the thing that's harassing them to back off. So if you have 100 bites, first of all, not all of those are going to be from venomous species. But if you don't know the species and you get bit, you're going to go to the hospital. Then you'll get there. They can tell from usually the look of the bite whether it was venomous or not. It's actually quite obvious in most cases. And then you'll describe the snake. If you've got a picture of it and you show it, the doctors in the hospitals are quite good in most cases of knowing which ones are venomous and which ones aren't. A lot of them actually have these books, the website, and we made a poster of the snakes of Hong Kong as well. But a lot of those cases end up, even when it's a venomous snake that bites, not all of them result in envenomation.
Okay.
So you could be bit by a bamboo pit viper and you'll have two little puncture marks. It'll be a little bit uncomfortable, but there'll be no effects from the venom. For envenomations, people being envenomed, you probably get maybe 30 to 60 a year.
Okay.
And Hong Kong is phenomenally good at treating snake bites, especially bamboo pit viper bites, which in most years, that's exclusively the snake that bites people and results in an envenomation.
Is it just because that they're so common around here?
Yeah, it's because of they're common and the other thing we talked about, which is their defensive behavior. If you come across a Chinese cobra and you startle it, it's going to lift up and spread its hood and it's going to hiss and you're going to know it's there. And you're going to go the other direction.
Yeah, so it makes itself known.
Very effective deterrent for most people when they see a cobra. And then as soon as it can get away, it's going to go the other direction. Bamboo vipers, if they see you getting close, they usually just sit still. They hope you don't see them. So if you've got somebody hiking at night or somebody that lives in a rural village and let's say they go put their hand on a gate to open it at night and they didn't realize there was a bamboo viper sitting there and they physically grab it, they'll probably get bit. Bamboo vipers, each snake can have a different personality, actually. They can be grumpy one day because they got attacked by something or haven't had a meal in a while. But for the most part, even with bamboo vipers, I find they don't want to strike when something big comes by them. So even if you put your hand next to them, in a lot of cases, they're not going to bite. They're just hoping you don't see them because they know they can't eat you. You're way too big.
Yeah.
So they're just like hoping to say, I hope I don't have to bite this thing and get into a fight with it because I probably won't win this fight. This thing's too big. Even when there's an envenomation, the hospitals are great at treating them. And they have anti-venom at most of the public hospitals. And pretty much nobody has any lasting effects from bamboo pit viper bites. It can happen. You could have a bite next to a nerve or have some type of an allergic reaction. So there are people that have been very unlucky. And I would never downplay the challenge of dealing with an injury like that. But almost exclusively every year, it's the bamboo pit viper that bites people accidentally. You might get some bites from people that were playing with a snake that they shouldn't have been playing with or something like that. But if you think about those numbers, 30 to 60, roughly speaking, the hospital authority will have actual stats. It should be right around there, though. If you think about the number of people that takes hikes every year, it's probably 15 million hikes taken in a year in Hong Kong. What percentage of the population either lives in a rural village or lives adjacent to forest in Hong Kong? It's a huge number of people. So if you think about the total risk, it's almost non-existent. It's not to say it's not a very scary thing when it happens to the individuals that do get bit, but as a statistical likelihood, it's incredibly, incredibly rare.
Yeah, and the way you put it, I do kind of find it cute. Like they have each of their own little personalities, and they seem quite shy when you put it like that.
They're very shy, and you know the funny thing is, actually, it is interesting because within each group of snakes, you do have some kind of consistent behaviors. So copperhead racer, for example, it's a non-venomous species we have. They can get over a meter. They have really tiny teeth. They've got really cool black stripe markings on kind of a copper brown body that transitions into a gray tail, kind of a cool looking snake. They've got two behaviors in particular that is very consistent when you find them. Number one is they have this big threat display, a really over-the-top threat display, especially for a snake that pretty much never bites and has really tiny teeth, where they puff up their body, the whole first third of their body, and they get themselves into an S like a typical snake style. And they'll hiss and they'll make these strikes, but most of the time they're not even biting when they do the strike. And when you know what they're doing, it's actually really kind of funny because it's super theatrical and you know there's no danger. Because even if they bite you, the teeth are so small that it would really do nothing. And then the other thing they do is they play dead. So if you actually picked one up, like let's say you were trying to get one off of a busy road or something like that, they'll do that hissy thing. But after a minute, if that doesn't work, most of them will play dead in a really extreme way where they literally flop like a noodle. And if you put them on the ground, they roll over on their back with their mouth open and their tongue hanging out the side.
That is so dramatic, like right out of a drama.
It's so over the top. It's over the top. And then if you want to get really entertaining with it, you take a few steps back and you watch them. And it's almost like as soon as they think you're far enough away, they'll turn their head like this and look at you. And if they think they can make a break for it, they immediately wake up and try and get away. And that's very consistent within that species. And similar with our many-banded crates. When they get nervous, they have a twitchy flop. So they kind of flop and they coil themselves and they always hide their head under their body. And it's very consistent no matter where you are on Hong Kong Island, New Territories, Lantau. When you see them, they all do this behavior. So you do have these consistent behaviors across the animal groups, but then you do have unique animals as well. So they might all use these defensive behaviors, but one snake maybe won't even bite if you're tapping it on its nose, which don't ever do that, by the way. But just as an example of how docile they can be or how not prone to bite they can be, even if they're venomous. And then the next one might bite at everything that comes close to it. Same species, maybe not too far from each other in the same habitat. And what's the reason that might be? Well, this one might have never been attacked before and has always survived by being still when it gets encountered. This one maybe earlier that week was attacked by a bird and has a small injury and as a result didn't get a meal that week. And so now just like a human being, if you put somebody through a really traumatic experience, they might be more prone to be nervous around other people or to lash out if they feel like they're being attacked. And I don't want to presume that this scenario I'm creating is 100% why one snake might do this or might not. But because I've encountered the variance in behavior where this snake, same species, same location, no interest in biting, this one, anything moves in front of it and it's striking, you've got to imagine that some of the experiences they have condition them to want to behave that way. So yeah, you do get behaviors that are probably a result of the experiences that individual animal had, just like people would.
Yeah, it's just like a child kind of learning what's bad and
Sure.
what's good for them.
Yeah. Or even like an adult. You know? We can have a
we're all
traumatic
still
experience and then decide we don't like that anymore. And whatever it is, anytime we see it, we want to be away from it or we lash out at it.
Yeah. Well, you talked a lot about these different quirks each group of snakes have, which is really interesting. But if you had to pick like one group of snakes, or maybe even just one species of snake that is your favorite, which one would it be?
Oh, this is like asking me if I have a favorite child. We do have a snake here, the mountain pit viper, which I really, really like. It's hard to say exactly why, but it's quite cryptic, so it never likes to come out, likes to hide all the time. It's got really interesting patterning. They live in streams, clear flowing mountain streams in the rock crevices and things like that and adjacent areas. And their face kind of looks like a river rock with water flowing over it. So it's really, really well camouflaged. They have a cool little tail. Like a lot of the vipers have something called a caudal lure.
Okay.
Caudal's referring to the tail and lure, just like you'd expect, like it's trying to lure something
Lure prey in.
Exactly. So these have a brown tail with a bright white line down the top. And I've never seen it using the tail as a lure, but it's a cool morphological feature, cool feature of the body that really kind of stands out. They're also really robust, heavy-bodied, and they also usually are only active. They're probably active all year, but they're only active and usually able to be observed in the coldest months of the year, which is very counterintuitive to the way snakes normally behave as cold-blooded animals.
Yeah.
So if I had to narrow it down to a snake that I'm never out of interest on, it's certainly mountain pit viper would be very close to the top.
Yeah. But I imagine you wouldn't be out of interest for any of them.
Yeah, they're all so interesting in their own right.
I think there has been a lot of increasing reports regarding snakes, and there do seem to be a lot more encounters between people and snakes nowadays compared to before. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think number one, Hong Kong remains a very green place. And, credit to the government and all the people in the private sector and in conservation bodies that push to keep that the way it is. By keeping so much of it green, and as population increases in the places that are built up, you're just going to organically get more encounters between wildlife and people. You also have far more people engaged in nature these days than you did in the past. People taking hikes on the weekend as a form of enjoyment is very, very common and popular now, and increasingly so.
Yeah.
For all those reasons, you've got just an increase of the amount of people in and adjacent to the places where the snakes are. So it's just straight math to know that you're going to have more encounters. I also think we observe more now, and we document now more with phone photos, and we have big forums to post them in. Hong Kong Snake's Facebook page has over 20,000 members now.
Wow.
And every single day we get multiple posts of people spotting snakes in the wild or near their houses or things like that.
Yeah. So if you were to summarize kind of your book, The Snakes of Hong Kong specifically, what is like the one thing you hope people can learn about snakes or remember about snakes just by looking at your book?
They're all so interesting, and there's so many of them. And there'll be at least one in there that does something or looks a certain way that's going to be compelling for you. Become a member of Hong Kong Snake's Facebook page because you'll see live snakes being posted all the time, and you'll get to learn there as well.
Lastly, for all the kind of explorers that are kind of interested in wanting to start exploring snakes, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, self-educate a little bit at the start. So go on the websites, go on the Facebook pages. There's a lot of videos online on YouTube, people that are what we call herpers, so people that go out looking for herpetofauna, reptiles and amphibians. There's some really great ones. Make sure you're trying to look at responsible people, people that don't take risks they don't need to. I think you can always find people that are willing to help in these spaces because there's a lot of passionate people and it's a pretty niche area. I think keeping your eyes open when you hike and walk outside is probably the best way to start. Most people don't see snakes because they're not really looking hard for them. Maybe the first few times, if you don't know what you're looking for, it can be tricky, but walk a little slower, scan a little bit more with your eyes, pay attention a little bit more, and you can do it for yourself to start.
Yeah, I imagine it does feel like more and more of a community of people who just really love snakes on that page.
Yeah, I think what it is people who love wildlife. Snakes are a category, and some people are super into it as a single category. But I don't know if I ever meet people that are interested in snakes that aren't also interested in other types of wildlife. They may have their main interest there and spend more of their time there, but all of us, when we go out, I have a general interest. This was the first project I undertook, so snakes comes up a lot more when I talk with people. But the turtles is out as well. We have really amazing turtle species here. I'm working on the lizards book now, so hopefully we get that done. And when I go out, I'm super interested in everything I see. See a beautiful moth, I want to stop and look and take pictures. And if I don't know what it is, I send it to somebody who knows moths to tell me. We'll bump into a mammal, and that's really exciting because they're quite hard to spot in Hong Kong usually. So yeah, snakes is definitely a category, but most people into this stuff like everything.
Yeah. Do you think there is a particular quality of people who are really interested and enthusiastic about nature?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. If I had to think about it on the spot, it is one of the most diverse groups of people I've actually ever met. Like, the number of people that are interested in wildlife will surprise you. So I've met everything from, CEOs to construction workers and everything in between that actually love and appreciate nature. A lot of them are just looking for a way and an excuse to get out there and experience it.
I imagine there is a lot of people from very diverse backgrounds just united because of maybe snakes, or it could be something else.
Yeah, and I think the consistent theme is usually they all have experiences from their youth with wildlife. And they've always held that close to their hearts, and they're always open to rekindling it. Which is another reason why I'll always have extra time for kids. And I always try and, present these things in a way that would be really motivational and exciting for children, because that's, certainly when I got really passionate and motivated about these things, and it carried through my whole life. And I think if we can do that for the next generation, we're just going to have a larger percentage of people that appreciate and want to do more with and for nature in the future.
Yeah, I was wondering, do you do it with your kids?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So
just go out herping.
Yeah, they come out for night walks. I take trips with them to other countries to do it sometimes as well. I've been to Borneo twice with my son just this year.
Wow.
So my son's really into it and loves the photography. My daughter likes getting out to nature for walks from time to time, and she's been doing it since she was super little as well. So yeah, I definitely want my kids exposed to nature. It's another reason I love being in Hong Kong. We've lived in other cities around the world, but having kids here is great because you can do the city life. The corporate opportunities and the business opportunities are like any big city, but you have nature available to you in a way that it's just not in other big urban environments around the world.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me today about everything snakes and herpetofauna. Even if you haven't fallen in love with snakes yet, and you might still have a lot more to learn about them, we hope this has given you a little taste of how fascinating and quirky or quacky the world of snakes is. So if you'd like to hear more about other fascinating animals in our next episode and the dedicated people working behind the scenes, make sure to kind of follow us and subscribe and stay tuned for the next one. The next episode is going to be about a creature also that comes out at night, but a mammal that flies. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Not enough. We need
just
more.
Starting. We're just starting for sure. Yeah, great.
Okay.
Kind of stick to the ground at the beginning, the ground and the slopes, and that'll be your best chance to spot something. And he looks very pretty on that rock, doesn't he?